Here,
Liv, I really
Watch Liv
think
drop. Watch
Liv,
Liv.
your new account should be story time with Liv.
I'm gonna give y'all my argument. All right. And I want to see if you could debunk me, both you and Bell, Ed, right? And this goes back to a conversation I had with Super Solid. He gave this allegory of a ship, right? And the ship, as the ship grew older, they will replace one board at a time, all the way through, and then until there were no old boards on the ship, and all the boards on the ship are new boards. Now the question is the ship a new ship, or is it an old ship, right? And what me and Super Solid came up with is that it's still a goddamn ship. I would pose the same thing applies to white supremacy, right? And I'd ground that in this position, Ed, that during the height of chattel slavery, there was roughly 4 million slaves enslaved here in America and in the United States that we know of, right? After that, you had debt peonage and a convict leasing system, right? Now, Ed, by your ideology, you would say that there was progress, right? But we see that followed up with segregation and Jim Crow. And then we have the Civil Rights Act. And in your mind, you would say that that would be progress, right? I would pose that right after the Civil Rights Movement in the mid-1960s, you have the war on drugs, which paved the way for mass incarceration that we see today, right? Now, today, there's roughly almost 2.5 million people enslaved. I mean, my fault, imprisoned, because the new felon is a slave, right? Property of the state. And so, Ed, here's what I would pose to. If you were to count the people that are enslaved, which is 2.5 million, and those that are on electronic monitoring, right? Of all of those people, it's roughly 7.5, 8 million people, right? 40% of which are black people. So 40% of 8 million is damn near 3.5 million people that are felons or property of the state, Ed. So my question for you, Ed, is this, is that on one hand, you say that shit has gotten better. On the other hand, they just enslaved 400,000 less of us. So, like, how can you say that's progress is my question. How can you call that progress, Ed? Or Bell?
No, I'm gonna let him take it.
Oh.
That's a good question.
I'm gonna need you to, can you repeat the question one more time? Just the last part.
How can you call that progress?
Progress.
Yeah, how was that progress?
I was just finna say Belle wasn't listening. She was just waiting on him to get done talking.
I was listening. I was.
Yeah, so Ed,
yeah,
everything I said is factually true. Do you disagree with any of the historical facts that I gave?
I mean, if they're facts, I haven't done my research on that yet. But if they're facts,
the Civil Rights Act, that shit happened. The war on drugs gave way to mass incarceration. That shit happened. Right? That chattel slavery, that shit happened. So is there any of those that I've given that you say aren't factual?
No.
Okay, so at the end of all of that, right, black people are still slaves. Whether it's 1865, 1965, or 2023. So how can you call that progress?
Well, I mean, you're saying that there's more black men that are incarcerated right now, right?
Nah, I didn't. Because actually,
that's what you were referring to.
Nah, I didn't. Nah, I just so what I made the analogy of is that a felon is property of the state, which would be a slave, because the 13th Amendment abolished the private ownership of people.
Thank you, Vicky.
But it upheld, thanks, Vicky. It upheld the public ownership of people through the 13th Amendment, right? So the way to make a slave was to make them a felon, because when you lose all your rights, right?
You can't vote, Can't do it. We can't really
Can't do none of that, right? And then
Yes,
I would
but
even argue, out of the 4 million people, 3.5